Rey. Where do we begin? She was the poster child of the sequel trilogy and the main lead. Unfortunately, she turned out rather badly. She's introduced as living alone on the planet of Jakku, scrapping metal and making bread with a whole bunch of mysteries surrounding her. Who was she? Where was she from? Why was she abandoned? Sadly, most of these questions would be answered in the most incompetent way possible, as there was no real plan set out for the sequel trilogy. Not to mention her mastering the Force with little to no explanation and even beating Kylo Ren without any training. Like, her being a Palpatine doesn't explain that. Like, yes, people strong in the Force were able to tap into it without training. However, it wasn't a controlled tapping into it, rather when they were very emotional and such. But they certainly couldn't just mind trick people without any training. That's what the Jedi and Sith trained for years for. To master actually using the Force. As an analogy, you could take Usain Bolt, who's the fastest sprinter. As a kid, he always had the potential to do the feats he achieved. However, without proper training, that wouldn't have manifested itself in that way. The same principle applies for Star Wars. Not everyone can reach the levels of Rey, as she's naturally extremely strong. However, she needs freaking training! Aside from that, she's also quite a bland character who's just insane at whatever she does and never struggles with anything. I never understood why Kylo kept fighting her, because in literally every encounter with her, he gets his ass kicked by her. Not once do I feel like Rey is in danger or in a situation she can't come out of. Also, the way she kills Palpatine is probably one of the funniest scenes ever. Like, yeah, I got 2 lightsabers now, what you gonna do, old man? Bam! Blast the lightning back in his face. I really doubt she'll have the same redemption like Anakin, because Anakin's flaws were rather minor and not world-breaking compared to hers. Let's just stick to ignoring the sequel's existence and hope the Rey movie doesn't see the light of day. Also, why the heck did she just adopt the Skywalker name? She barely knew them. All she knew Luke for was this angry old man who was yelling at her, and Leia was the nice lady who trained her for like 2 weeks. Guess that was enough for her to take their name, huh? Admiral Holdo was introduced in The Last Jedi as a stubborn, arrogant boss who causes inner conflict within the Resistance, especially with Poe Dameron, who she argues and belittles in the film. She is portrayed as being a sort of antagonistic admiral, leading her to spend the film trying to prove that her plan is correct. Only problem is, her plan doesn't make any friggin' sense, and there was no reason for her to keep it secret. For context, the Rebel fleet was being chased down by the entire First Order fleet. Literally everyone on board thinks they're going to die. And her, as the leading commander, decides, yep, I'm not going to tell you anything. Just shut up and trust me. I know what I'm doing, while being very condescending about it. She goes so far that even a mutiny happens because she didn't want to tell the plan. And her plan just turns out to be, yeah, let's sneak on smaller ships and hope the First Order doesn't notice, even though they're literally in spotting distance away. Like, what kind of plan is that? If you want to evacuate, then do it immediately. Why provoke the mutiny? Even if there was a suspected spy among the rebels, which is a popular reason given for the secrecy, what exactly would the First Order have done with that information? The spy goes like, yeah, their plan is to evacuate for the surface once they're close enough, and the First Order being right behind them goes like, yep, thanks for the info, but we still can't catch up to them despite this info. Her plan is just dumb. She just serves to make artificial conflict, which is then sold to us as something super smart, even though it really ain't that deep. So yeah, she probably goes down as the dumbest rebel commander, and most fans were happy that she sacrificed herself. Although that freaking hyperspace ram is a huge lore-breaking issue in and of itself, and that is the thing I personally dislike her the most for. Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy was the beating heart of the Star Wars saga. Farm boy to Jedi Knight, he faced Vader, resisted the dark side, and believed in redemption when no one else did. That's the Luke people grew up with, the hopeful hero. So, when The Last Jedi dropped and showed us a bitter, isolated Luke who rejected the Force and hid away on Ahch-To, the fandom exploded. Some people found this arc was a powerful, honest betrayal of failure. Others think it flat-out betrays who Luke was. The pro side argues that this is what happens when legends crack under pressure. Luke tried to rebuild the Jedi all by himself, failed spectacularly with Ben Solo, and let guilt destroy him. So he chose to disappear, convinced the Jedi needed to end because him and the Order had become a symbol of failure. For some people, they felt this was a realistic story of a broken old man. What these fans don't understand, though, is that Luke Skywalker wouldn't do this. Some other random old dude, sure, maybe. But not Luke. This is the guy who refused to kill Vader even when the Empire told him to. Who believed in the light when no one else did. The idea that Luke would even momentarily consider killing his nephew in his sleep felt like a character assassination. And in the fact that he cut himself off from the Force and left his friends to fight the First Order alone, even letting his friends die, it just doesn't make any sense. This is the guy who rushed off to Dagobah to get to Bespin to help his friends, fully aware that it was a trap. And now we're supposed to believe that he just abandoned all of this and watches idly by as his friends in the galaxy get destroyed? In the EU, he became the greatest Jedi in history, always trying his best to make the galaxy a better place and fighting on the front line to defend his values. Sadly, we won't ever see this version of Luke ever on the big screen. Supreme Leader Snoke. Another sequel trilogy character. Weird. A character also introduced in The Force Awakens, Snoke was shown as a superior to already menacing characters such as Kylo Ren. His deformed figure and booming voice made fans excited to hear more about him and his backstory. They wanted to know how he was connected to the First Order, and what place he had in the galaxy. There were thousands of theories about him. Was he Palpatine's former master, Darth Plagueis? Was he some other ancient Sith? Where was he during the original trilogy? The hype surrounding him was so great, up until The Last Jedi, and he gets killed off like it was nothing. And to top that off, The Rise of Skywalker showed that he wasn't even anyone of importance. We just get hinted at that he's a cheap, easily clonable vessel for Palpatine. What a disappointment. Also, I never quite understood why Palpatine would pick a deformed clone. Does he look more menacing like that? Like, if I was an old guy and given a chance to have my conscience be transferred into literally any body, I sure wouldn't pick the old crippled guy who looks like Hugh Hefner in a golden bathrobe coming to his last years, but rather have myself be transformed into a prime Arnold Schwarzenegger clone in an athletic body. I'm aware of the concept of dark side corruption withering away at the body, but that would mean that he'd constantly have to change the body. In the EU, when they brought back Palpatine, that was literally what he had to do. He jumped into very young bodies that quickly deteriorated, requiring him to have several different clones to contain his essence. It's just not explained properly with Snoke, and everything is just left ambiguous because the writers couldn't find a good reason why stuff happens and for what reason. Kind of the story of the entire sequel trilogy, sadly. That's why, if you're like me, you choose to ignore their existence and consider it as some distant multiverse, whereas the real canon is now considered Legends Expanded Universe. Rose Tico was a character introduced in The Last Jedi. I'm gonna beat this dead horse some more. She originally served the purpose as being a potential love interest for Finn. However, the way they went about it was pretty funny. Throughout the movie, she keeps telling Finn, the child soldier, how war profiteering and animal cruelty is bad. 'Cause for sure he doesn't know basic stuff like that, right? Finn friggin' goes off when he sees a horse being whipped. Jokes aside, everything she does just kinda doesn't serve the overall plot at all. She just tells the audience the most basic stuff and talks about it as some great eureka moment. It's just kinda belittling, and an insult to the audience's intelligence. Also, she intercepts the sacrifice of Finn by crashing into him, taking away all the significance of the potential sacrifice. She then even kisses him out of nowhere, and you can just see on Finn's face like, what the hell, why is she kissing me now? The reason for the kiss? Saving what we love while allowing the First Order to literally blow a hole in the wall and kill everyone she loves just makes it all the more dumb. Also, because Finn didn't die here, he's reduced to a Rey fanboy in the last movie. Rose, on the other hand, was cast aside entirely, limited to like 2 lines in the entire script.
We believe this? You have to say it like that. What now?
Yep, even Disney doesn't like her anymore. Just not a well-written character. General Hux was a general for the First Order who was introduced in The Force Awakens. Originally, he was a pretty well-liked character, serving his role well. When things started to go downhill was when The Last Jedi came along. Funny how that term can be applied to many different characters and plot points in the sequel trilogy. There, he was turned into more of a comedic relief character, not being taken seriously in almost any scenario.
Hugs?
He can.
With an H? Skinny guy? Kind of pasty?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
He went from a genuinely interesting character in The Force Awakens that showed power and strength within the ranks of the First Order to a bumbling idiot. Not only that, but we were led to believe later on that another officer within the First Order was a spy, only to be told that it was Hux all along. To top it all off, it was announced in the most joking way possible.
I am the spy.
What?
I don't really understand his motivations either. Like, him and Kylo could have actually been interesting antagonists against each other, with each of them taking a part of the First Order under their command and then duking against each other. Like, if he really wanted to take Kylo down, why not with the allies he certainly had within the First Order? There's not logical reason to then help the rebels. Could have been something to be explored, but Disney decided to waste it on him being a spy, I guess. Captain Phasma, portrayed by Gwendolyn Christie, was the first live-action Chrome Stormtrooper we've ever gotten. You know, the guys you'd always get as special promotional figures either from LEGO or other toy companies. She got marketed towards us as a major antagonist in the build-up to The Force Awakens, going as far as even getting her own book that explains her origins and upbringing. So fans, and yours truly, were excited to see a character who promised to be the sequel trilogy's answer to Boba Fett, a mysterious, badass enforcer. Unfortunately, Phasma became yet another one of the most infamous examples of wasted potential in Star Wars. Phasma's role in the story is minimal. In The Force Awakens, she's outmaneuvered by Finn and Han Solo, who force her to lower Starkiller Base's shields with minimal resistance. Her most significant moment comes in The Last Jedi, where she battles Finn during the Supremacy's destruction, only to be defeated and killed after a few minutes of screen time. In her book, she's literally a gladiator fighting wild animals with axes. She literally killed her parents and killed a whole bunch of people armed with barely anything just to survive on the desolate world she was born on. She is the definition of a battle-hardened warrior. But nope, not in the movie she isn't. There, she's just another pushover character that could have been any other character and it wouldn't have affected the story in the slightest. Just a walking, cool-looking asset that gives some one-liners. To be fair, that could also be Boba Fett in the OT without any added context from outside sources, thus take her as you will, I guess. I do think there's some potential with her, but I think anything involving the sequel's characters currently doesn't pique the interest of anyone. The Knights of Ren were only seen in a split second during The Force Awakens in 2015. This scene was enough at the time for fans to create a whole bunch of theories and other things about them. Who they were, what they could be. Were they a new breed of dark side warriors? Were they fallen Jedi? Were they some insane cult that follows the dark side? Well, as with all characters in the sequel, they fell completely short of expectations and were just glorified wallflowers. Rian Johnson decided not to do anything with them in The Last Jedi, and when J.J. Abrams came in for The Rise of Skywalker, he decided to use them again for this.
Knights of Ren.
Ghouls.
Ghouls! Yep. That's all we learn about them before they get their asses kicked by Kylo during the final fight. Even the Inquisitors get better portrayal, and that says quite a lot, if even these absolute jokes of characters get more out of them than you. To be fair, there is a comic series that tried to flesh them out. In that version, they're shown as a violent, Force-sensitive gang of different mercenaries that Kylo eventually takes over after killing their previous leader. But still, we don't really know anything else about the individual members. It's truly sad that when back in the days of the EU, minor background characters like Amanaman or Max Rebo, who appear for like 3 seconds in the background of Jabba's palace, have a whole backstory of how they ended up there, and these guys just get, yeah, they're mercenaries and like the dark side. Waste of more insane costume designs, and that's all there is to them. To be honest, my personal interest in them is non-existent at this point anyway, and I think that reflects a lot of the fandom. My honorable mention, DJ, whose name stands for Don't Join. He's the slicer recruited by Finn and Rose during their mission to disable the First Order's hyperspace tracker. DJ is notable for his pragmatic worldview as he openly rejects both the Resistance and the First Order, declaring it's all a machine, live free, don't join. Only reason he's on this list is because I saw this Reddit post where they put him as an all-time great villain in Star Wars. DJ, an all-time great. What kind of stuff was this guy on? He is part of the most pointless subplot of the worst Star Wars movie ever made. How does he make any list containing the greatest characters? Not to mention being on one level with Thrawn, Vader, or Cad Bane. DJ's presence ultimately adds little to the story, and if you'd cut him out, the story wouldn't change at all. So yeah, Don't like him, don't like The Last Jedi. Maz Kanata was also introduced in the sequel trilogy. When concept arts and first script drafts first leaked, a lot of people theorized she'd be like Yoda. Describing her final product, though, is difficult. Is she a sort of mentor character? Maybe an information holder? Or maybe Nope. She essentially serves as a plot device and exposition dumper. She somehow had Luke's lightsaber, but never explained how she got it or why she has it? She's not force-sensitive, wise, or even charming. Not to mention that she doesn't even really show up in The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker. They could have easily replaced her with another pre-existing character, someone who would logically have access to Luke's saber. Many don't like her because of the little plot significance she holds and how easily the issue of her character could have been avoided. But overall, she's one of the less intrusive characters brought forth by the sequels. May and Asha are the central characters of the Acolyte, being twin sisters. Unfortunately, much like the rest of the Acolyte, their characterization is a mess, riddled with conveniences and just doing whatever the plot needs them to do. I know that a lot of people haven't actually watched this show, so I'll be talking about its plot a bit as well to explain these characters' confused motivations. Asha is introduced as a former Jedi Padawan who left the Order and became a ship mechanic, while May has spent the past 16 years training under a mysterious Sith Lord hell-bent on revenge against the 4 Jedi who supposedly destroyed her entire coven of witches. Sounds like a reasonable motivation overall, right? So, May gets introduced by killing one of the 4 Jedi. This leads to a murder mystery chase where the Jedi try to find out who this murderer is. Asha gets accused of being the murderer because they look alike, and thus the Jedi take her along until they find the real murderer. May, meanwhile, manages to kill off a second Jedi, but surprise again, she decides that she'll just turn herself in. Yep, for no reason whatsoever, May, after having killed 2 of the 4 Jedi, decided to turn herself in and surrender herself to the Jedi after learning that Asha was still alive, as she was oblivious to that previously. Let me make it clearer. She learns that her sister is still alive, and decides that all 16 years of training with the Sith is futile now, and she'll simply drop it all and even reveal the Sith's presence to the Jedi. Is there any explanation for this? Nope. May's motivation makes even less sense, as it is then revealed later on that when May and Asha were still children, the Jedi arrived on their planet of witches to get child Asha and May to take them to the Jedi Order, as was tradition for them. Asha wanted to leave their witch clan and join the Jedi, while May did not. Instead of just, talking about it or accepting Asha's choice, May decides that the only logical course of action is to burn everything down. Yep, she sets a fire that destroys the entire coven and leads to all the chaos that ensues. In the fire, one of the Jedi, Master Soul, kills the twins' mother because she turned into this smoke monster and attacked the Jedi, which leads to all the hatred towards these 4 Jedi. So it is rather odd that she would then go ahead and just surrender herself to the murderer of her mother just because she found her sister again. Also, she kind of randomly drops the whole killing the Jedi thing and just switches to that they should just face justice in front of court. Guess her bloodlust was easily stilled. Asha is less offensive overall because she doesn't really do anything and just kind of tags along with the Jedi until the last scene of the show. There, it is revealed to her that Saul had killed her mother and she friggin' snaps, and out of nowhere just decides to kill her master Saul and join the Sith. Mind you that there was no build-up for that at all, by the way. Even rather, the exact opposite, where we see her accuse May of being a cold-blooded killer. She just kind of goes like, oh, he killed my mother, let me kill him now and join the friggin' Sith Order? See how their motivations are flawed and just really convenient and contrived? I think the writers must have felt so smart and dramatic when they wrote those scenes. Anyways, the Acolyte has so many issues, and I don't really want to talk about it for too long, as I actually really don't care about this show. There's also this dumb twist where May and Asha aren't actually twins, they're the same person, created through Force magic. This revelation is supposed to be a shocking moment, but it doesn't add anything to the story. They're still 2 separate people with different personalities and motivations, so what was the point? It feels like the writers just wanted to throw in a last-minute mind-blowing twist, Rian Johnson style. Now get these 2 out of here. Boba Fett used to be the mysterious badass of the Star Wars universe. Helmet always on, few words, instant respect. He survived a few minutes of screen time in the original trilogy and still became a legend. The expanded universe turned him into a Mandalorian war machine, the perfect bounty hunter with a complex code and deep lore. But that's not who we got in the Book of Boba Fett. The Disney Plus version of Boba is different. Older, more talkative, and weirdly diplomatic. After escaping the Sarlacc in a near-death experience, we see him spend a lot of time with the Tusken Raiders, which is the reason that he decides to change his way of life. His time with the Tusken is often praised as a very good part of his story by some fans. However, I disagree. His change didn't really make any sense, as the Tuskens didn't really treat him well in my opinion. Like, they literally capture and torture him, dragging him through the deserts and almost dehydrating him. But apparently, after saving the Tusken kid for no reason other than empathy, he then goes on to adapt their culture. See how that doesn't really make sense? Either he has a terminal stage version of Stockholm Syndrome, or he was just waiting his entire life for the chance to jump into the Tusken Raider culture, and had finally achieved that goal. Like, I get that a near-death experience can change one's view, but what exactly did the Tusken do to make him decide to spend his time with them now? His motivations are just not explained properly. After the Tusken arc, he then goes on to become the Major of Mos Espa, which also is very questionable as to why he even has this connection to Tatooine. Also, why would a bounty hunter now want to become the ruler of an empire? None of this is really explained either. The argument is often that it's supposed to be a story about a reformed killer who's trying to rule with respect, but their execution of it was just terrible. He appears very soft, and it's so hard to imagine that this guy used to be a brutal bounty hunter. Like, look at this scene here, where the Major Domo says that the mayor doesn't have time to meet him.
If you wish to continue breathing, I advise you to weigh your next words carefully.
That was a bit heavy-handed, don't you think?
Do you want the appointment or not?
Yeah, seems really heavy-handed to threaten someone with a blaster. Jeez, guess speaking up for yourself is something. You've never done that before, right, Boba? Like, he should be the one to say that line that Fennec says. He should be going around threatening people if they don't fall in line. But him saying it's too heavy-handed to threaten the Major Domo just shows how they completely misunderstood his character. He literally does nothing in this show. He gets beaten at every turn and needs some outside intervention to be saved. He even gets clowned on by the Major Domo character.
If you'll excuse me, I'll see what I'm able to do.
Did he just lock the door?
But instead of shooting him in the head, which is what I really wanted him to do, as the Major Domo annoyed me to no end, he just kinda takes it and talks it off. Like, bruh, he's literally disrespecting you here. Do something about it. You are running a crime empire, not a summer camp where good vibes alone will carry you through it. Like, show that disobeying or disrespecting you will have consequences. But nope, at every turn, be it these moped guys or the Wookiee who either try to kill him or disrespect him, he in turn hires them and gives them a job. Yep, the Wookiee assassin is now working for you. No further repercussions for literally trying to murder you a few days ago. Way to go, Boba. Way to be a friggin' doormat for every character in the show to take advantage of. How are the other crime syndicates supposed to take him seriously when every time they send someone to try to take him out, manipulate or scheme him to their bidding, he just kind of excuses them and goes like, yeah, I didn't like that. Please don't do it again. And even friggin' hires them. Hell, he even has the Major Domo stick around in his palace. So yeah, Boba is unfortunately just a buffoon now, and it's really sad to see him get assassinated like that. The Vespa Gang, officially known as the Mods, which stands for the Modifier Gang, are a group of cybernetically enhanced youths introduced in the Book of Boba Fett. Living on the streets of Mos Espa, they work for Boba Fett after he offers them employment instead of punishment for stealing water. That's some real moral values there, Boba. Complete 180 from your previous life.
No disintegrations.
They're best known for their bright, glossy speeder bikes that resemble vintage Vespas, hence why I call them the Vespa Gang. The mod's aesthetic, a mix of cyberpunk and retro flair, feel completely out of place in the gritty, dusty environment of Tatooine. Like, literally every vehicle we've ever seen on Tatooine looks like crap because of all the sand grinding against it. Hence their shiny bright Vespas make no sense. But anyway, they get often clowned on for their slow-moving speeder chase in Episode 3, and it's probably one of the worst chase scenes ever. Only to be rivaled by the Leia chase scene in Kenobi, that is. Why are they bad? Well, they just don't add anything to the story at all. Their story with Boba can be summed up like this. They're poor and jobless, so they steal water from one of Boba's town. Boba doesn't like them stealing water, so he offers them to be part of his private force. And that's it. That's their entire story. Let's play a game. I dare you to tell me this guy's name. 3, 2, 1. Got it? It's Scad. Now this Vespa girl. 3, 2, 1. Drash. Now you'll have learned more about them than in the entirety of the Book of Boba Fett. I certainly did. Oh, and they also know the spinning trick from Anakin. Iden Versio is the protagonist of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign, introduced as the leader of Inferno Squad, an elite Imperial Special Forces unit. Raised as an Imperial loyalist, Iden goes on a journey from a devoted servant of the Empire to a heroic member of the Rebel Alliance, after being disillusioned by the cruelty and corruption of the Empire, particularly after witnessing the destruction of her homeworld Vardos during Operation Cinder. Now, why is that bad? Because it's just such a boring trait. It's a story trait that had been seen for so many times already. Agent Kallus, General Hux, Darth Vader, Hondo, Kylo Ren, and the list goes on. I was hoping when Iden was revealed that she could actually be a deep and interesting character. An elite Imperial agent that truly believes in the Empire's cause of order through fear and actually sticks to these principles till the end. That would have been a good setup for an interesting antagonist, being one that's completely indoctrinated into the Empire's philosophy. Imagine following her down the path of doing more and more atrocious things, being one that can't be turned. Sadly, it's wasted on a rush turn that kinda comes out of nowhere, and now she's just fully devoted to the Rebel Alliance without any second thought, killing and shooting down all her former comrades. What a boring story arc. Even if she'd have a problem with what the Empire was doing, wouldn't she rather try to change the Imperial's mind about preventing Operation Cinder, instead of going, yeah, I have to kill them all now? Jar Jar Binks, to nobody's surprise, is one of the most hated characters in Star Wars. Even people that never came in contact with Star Wars know of the goofy-looking orange squeaky toy lizard, with flappy ears, looking like he could fly away at a moment's notice. First introduced in 1999 in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, being part of the Gungan species as the main comedic relief and a relatable character for children in the audience.
Jar Jar is a key to all this. If we get Jar Jar working, because he's a funnier character than we've ever had in any of the movies before.
Jar Jar runs around, knocking things over and being sassy, saying funny things in a funny voice, no matter how dire the situation may be. And that's the issue. Many serious moments happen in The Phantom Menace where Jar Jar just is himself. He interrupts Qui-Gon Jinn when he's having a serious discussion at the dinner table. He yells and screams in a very childish way when they're in danger. And that absolutely annoyed many older moviegoers and fans in 1999. And today. Despite this, Jar Jar could have been less invasive and still comedic. Jar Jar Binks surprisingly holds a lot of plot relevance in Episode 1, guiding Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to his people in order to help Naboo, the main plot point of The Phantom Menace. Good going, Jar Jar. You're doing good. Also, he's the guy who actually suggests giving Palpatine emergency powers for the first time, which is hilarious in and of itself. Like, who on Naboo looked at Jar Jar and thought, yeah, we'll have this guy represent the Gungans in Naboo's Senate, the literal guy they banished for being too incompetent. Funnily enough, Jar Jar's perception nowadays has shifted quite a bit, actually. As most people who grew up watching the prequels are adults now, a big amount of people actually came to his defense in another video where I was talking about him, as they were fond of him as a kid. Also, I think the Darth Jar Jar theory had helped his popularity tremendously. Add that to the absolute disaster of most of the sequel characters, and Jar Jar seems less bad than imagined. Mace Windu is one of the most powerful Jedi of his time, but also a bit polarizing. This is mainly because Windu stands as the embodiment of the Jedi Order's complete adherence to the Jedi Code. The Jedi, especially in the prequels, are shown to be far from perfect. They preach peace but serve in a war. They suppress emotion rather than deal with it, and Windu is the most prominent representation of that flawed system. He's the highest-ranking council member, second only to Yoda, and he often comes out cold, dismissive, and rather inflexible. He's fiercely committed to the Jedi Code and sees anyone straying from it or behaving too reckless and such as a threat. This can especially be seen in his treatment of Anakin, whom he wanted to become a Jedi due to his age and whose rather unorthodox ways of going about battle often clashed with the Jedi Code. Fans often point to "I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi," followed by "If what you told me is true, you will have earned my trust," as proof that he never respected Anakin, but there are also plenty of other examples. Throughout the Clone Wars series, he's also presented in this dismissive way. The way he handles Ahsoka's banishment from the Order and also this scene just shows how far he had strayed from the way of the Jedi.
What do you mean?
I'm sorry, citizen. These matters are for the Council to discuss.
Literally, you can see that he doesn't really consider Ahsoka someone worth talking to anymore due to her leaving the Order. Perhaps if he would have been less rigid, she might have even shared Maul's warning about Anakin with them, and who knows what could have transpired then. But the way he just cuts her off just comes off as extremely distant and tactless. This is a stark contrast to Jedi like Obi-Wan and Yoda, who are both gentle and sympathetic, trying to help others and uplift them rather than put them down. The thing is, though, this was actually intentionally written that way. Windu's supposed to be a culprit to show everything that's going wrong with the Jedi and how they could fall. In his defense, though, I do think much of the hate he gets is tied more to his portrayal in the movies and later series, rather than to the character's full story. The Revenge of the Sith novelization, Shatterpoint, and several other EU works gave us a more layered Mace, one who was deeply aware of the fine line he walked between light and darkness. He was strict, sure, but not without depth or empathy. Later material in the Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi seem to really lean harder into the screw Windu angle, stripping away a lot of that nuance and making him a scapegoat for the Jedi's flaws. That's unfortunate, because it flattens a character who was never supposed to be likable, but always worthy of respect. Anakin Skywalker is actually quite disliked, and was criticized to no end upon the release of The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. He was disliked in Episode 1 by many, mainly due to Jake Lloyd's acting and tone.
It's the fastest ever. There's a big race tomorrow on Boonta Eve. You could enter my pod.
But give him a break. He was just a kid. A lot of criticism was also given towards Hayden Christensen's portrayal of Anakin in Attack of the Clones, which would be mostly Anakin complaining and pouting and furrowing his brows, as well as the unfortunately awkward script.
It's all Obi-Wan's fault. He's jealous.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe at times that this guy turns into Darth Vader. The criticism at the time did have its merit, and even nowadays there are solid reasons why Anakin's portrayal in the prequels is rather questionable, without added context from supported media. However, nowadays he's probably the most beloved character in Star Wars, mainly owed to his rich character development in the Clone Wars, where he was portrayed as less of an impulsive nuisance, but rather a sassy, likable Jedi showing his true heroism, and actually starting to show why he was such a great Jedi. He evolves throughout the series, showing how he does have issues with attachment, yet still always has the greater good in mind. His relationship with Obi-Wan and Ahsoka are also very wholesome, and are well developed, making his eventual fall all the more tragic. He is the chosen one. Thus, I'm so glad that the main character of Star Wars is now the most beloved character. It really makes Obi-Wan's description of him to Luke in A New Hope more accurate. Ki-Adi-Mundi. Oh dear Ki-Adi, how far you have fallen from grace. He is one of the more recognizable members of the Jedi Council in the prequels thanks to his huge forehead, and also because he's one of the few Jedi Council members who actually has dialogue in the movies and isn't just a prop to sit on the Council. He sits alongside Yoda and Mace Windu on the Council, serving as one of the Republic's most senior Jedi, and being one of the most powerful ones during his time. But, much like Windu, he symbolized one of the most frustrating examples of the Jedi Order's blind spots. Actually, he is even argued to be a complete sociopath, due to a myriad of different scenes in the movies and series where he's just flat out wrong. These include, but are not limited to, denying the return of the Sith, denying Dooku being able to turn to the dark side, ignoring Duchess Satine's request for aid for Mandalore, being the first to accuse Ahsoka, leading to her banishment, as well as wanting to keep Yoda at Coruscant when he had his visions, and nearly leading to Yoda never learning about becoming a Force ghost. Yeah, not the best track record for good decision-making. What is this ode to? Because he was, once again, a complete adherent to the Jedi Code, being detached, emotionless, and distanced. Mundi is often seen to completely deny emotion, even going as far as to shrug off the death of his family as shit happens, and simply telling Anakin during Obi-Wan's supposed death that he should just move on. He's completely stuck in this worldview, and seems to ignore any sort of flexibility. Furthermore, he's also responsible for the war crime of using flamethrowers against the very much so sentient and intelligent Geonosians. The final nail in the coffin is that he actually had a family, as mentioned previously. Ki-Adi-Mundi is one of the only Jedi allowed to maintain a family. He has wives and children on Saria, because of the low birth rate on his homeworld. That alone wouldn't be a big deal, except it exposes a big double standard in the Jedi Order. Strict codes for some, exceptions for others, and Mundi being the biggest hypocrite of them all. These theories were mainly spread through a myriad of YouTube videos and have since kinda set the narrative about Mundi, with most people really disliking him and saying he's the worst Jedi aside from someone like Krell.
We do not have many ships to spare.
What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
Watto is actually a slightly controversial character in Star Wars. Why is that, you may ask? He's not essentially powerful or central to the story. He's introduced in The Phantom Menace as a junk dealer and slave owner on Tatooine, the guy who owns both Anakin and Shmi Skywalker. So right off the bat, the guy's a slave owner, which is despicable when looking at it from our moral standpoint, but for the sake of the plot and in the greater Star Wars universe, it was actually quite common to own slaves in the Outer Rim and the world established. Thus, it served a narrative purpose. Furthermore, he's scrappy and greedy, profiting off of people's suffering and sees no issue with it. But the real reason Watto sparks debate is his depiction. With his exaggerated accent, mannerisms, and obsession with money, a lot of fans and critics have pointed out uncomfortable parallels to anti-Semitic or anti-Middle Eastern stereotypes. George Lucas never confirmed any intent behind his portrayal, but it doesn't change the fact that Watto's character design and voice raise serious questions about the representation in sci-fi media. He's not the only Star Wars alien to toe that line, but he's one of the most glaring examples. He appears again in Attack of the Clones with a bit more humility and even some regret, so yeah, I think the controversy behind him is understandable, but I think it adds to his character, and he's also a major part of why Anakin's backstory is the way it is. Although, to be honest, he actually gave Anakin a lot of free time and such, unlike how I'd imagined a slave would be treated. When Ahsoka was first introduced in 2008 in the Clone Wars movie and earlier seasons of the show, she was shown as a snippy, impulsive young Togruta who was Anakin's young Padawan. Similar to Anakin in Attack of the Clones, she makes reckless decisions without permission and always has a smart comeback for a direct command. While some may find it charming, many found the character extremely annoying. At first. In the earlier days of Star Wars The Clone Wars, Ahsoka continued to make brash decisions with little to no consequences, and can generally be compared to that of an annoying younger sister. Eventually, Ahsoka's annoying traits started to change. Ahsoka developed as a character, learning from her mistakes and behaviors, and slowly shedding herself of those annoying flaws and traits while retaining the fun and interesting parts of her personality. Ahsoka went from being one of the most annoying characters in the prequel era to being one of the most beloved in the whole Star Wars franchise, inspiring people around the entire world. This culminated in the arc where she walks away from the Order, being a big reason for Anakin's fall to the dark side, and showing how the Jedi have strayed from their way. Also, her finale in the Clone Wars during the Siege of Mandalore are some of the best episodes in Star Wars ever. Later, she returns in Star Wars Rebels and has a final fight with Vader where she supposedly gets killed. However, as we all know, she survived and goes on to exist in the current canon, even outliving the entire galactic civil war. This, however, opens a myriad of different problems in my opinion, like, why didn't she ever go back and confront Vader again? Surely she would have wanted to have a say in the fate of the galaxy. Why didn't she meet Luke, the literal son of Anakin? Surely she knew about his existence given her ties to the rebellion that have been shown at multiple points. Dave Filoni making her survive the Malachor 5 fight just shouldn't have happened. Considering she was alive during the Galactic Civil War, she surely would have wanted to help the original trilogy characters if she could, and we aren't given any reason why she couldn't help them. Thus, my hot take is she should have died there on Malachor 5, as that would have been the best story. She has overstayed her welcome, and is operating in a time frame now where it just doesn't make sense to have a powerful Force sensitive that technically had a very deep connection to the Skywalkers in there. But Dave Filoni just loved his original character too much. She was brought back to do sod all, and she's now just kinda hanging around and chasing Thrawn, I guess. Guess now that the Empire's gone, she cares about fighting them again. Also, she's now in literally every story arc and kinda just cramped in there as Filoni seems to want to document every part of her life instead of actually telling a good story with her. Yes, I'm looking at you, Tales of the Jedi. To sum it up, great character, but has taken a dip as with everything from recent Disney. Pong Krell is one of the infamous Jedi introduced in the Clone Wars. He's shown as a strict, unyielding general who demands absolute obedience from his clone troopers. However, it quickly becomes clear that Krell is not just strict, he's downright cruel. Krell's disdain for the clones under his command and his reckless strategies result in extremely heavy casualties, which in turn creates tension and resentment among his troops. He refuses to call the clones by their names, rather calling them by their numbers. He literally has his troops walk through a minefield while he stands on top and just watches how they explode and die. He never, ever engages in battle himself, which is a stark contrast to the other Jedi who have always seen right up front with their troops. As the arc unfolds, his true colors are revealed. Krell has fallen to the dark side, seeking to serve the Sith in anticipation of the Republic's downfall. In the end, he gets killed by the clones, but the damage had been done. He was responsible for the death of countless clones, including Waxer, and I think I'm speaking for everyone when I say I was so relieved when Dogma ended up shooting him. Of course, he was purposely written this way, but actually I would have preferred if he would have stayed a Jedi, as the idea of a Jedi who hates clones and has completely been pushed to the edge by the war is the best indicator of the Clone Wars being a pushing point for the Jedi, pushing them further toward the dark side and showing how they'll eventually fail. There's an argument that he's actually written too evil from the start, as we can barely see how this guy could have ever been a Jedi, and we just have to assume that he used to be a more traditional Jedi. Perhaps showing him being a more traditional and heroic Jedi in a flashback scene or something would have made that better. Even seeing how he interacts with other Jedi who question him for his high death toll would be really interesting. But yeah, what we got was good enough. Commander Fox was a clone trooper commander of the Coruscant Guard. His duties primarily revolved around maintaining law and order on the Republic's capital planet, which gave him a unique position compared to other clone commanders stationed on the front lines. You'd think this high-ranking position would make him a standout character. Well, he is, for all the wrong reasons. Despite having really sick armor and only serving his duty, a lot of fans started to really dislike him due to two big things. First, he chased down Ahsoka after she was framed for the Jedi Temple bombing. Fox was relentless in pursuing her, even when her innocence became increasingly apparent to others. Also because of this scene where he didn't have any empathy to let Anakin in to see her. He is the literal definition of good soldiers follow orders, doing anything to stick to protocol. Fans saw this as a frustrating display of his inability to question orders or use independent judgment, a stark contrast to clones like Rex or Cody who often displayed moral complexity and personal growth. And it gets worse. Later in Season 6, Fox commits what many fans consider an unforgivable act, killing Fives, one of the series' most beloved clones, during the conspiracy arc involving the inhibitor chips. I think even the writers wanted him to be disliked because after he kills Fives, all the other shock troopers mourn him by standing around him. All except for Fox, who is absent for some reason. So yeah, this moment solidified Fox as one of the least liked clones among the fandom. He's later killed by Darth Vader by getting his neck snapped apart. This take has led to a lot of controversy, as tons of fans came to Fox's defense by declaring that Fox was following orders from Palpatine himself. Also, he lacked the influence of the Jedi, being one of the only clone commanders that didn't report to a Jedi general. To add to that, if you look at it from a more realistic viewpoint, it was a high-stakes situation with Fives where there was a chance that one of the clones under Fox's order could have been shot. Thus, there certainly is some justification for shooting Fives. However, in my opinion, he simply could have done a stun shot if that's the main argument. So, yeah, wanted to show both sides of the commentary a bit. Trace and Rafa Martez are sisters introduced in the Clone Wars Season 7 as part of Ahsoka's journey after leaving the Jedi Order. They operate as independent scavengers and smugglers in Coruscant's underworld, with Trace dreaming of owning her own ship and Rafa taking a more pragmatic approach to survival. Now, why are they disliked? Well, most of the blame can be laid on Trace. She is comically dumb. I think she could actually rival Jar Jar in just doing dumb stuff. During a spice run, she literally dumps the entire load because she got mad. Literally, could they not come up with any other way that could help them get the characters in trouble? Throughout the arc, she just keeps being bratty, naive, and super annoying. And mind you, she's an orphan that grew up in the underworld of Coruscant, where there are criminals everywhere. How did she even survive up to this point? Another reason she's disliked that much is because she was part of the final season of The Clone Wars, a show that had been cancelled but brought back to give us one last glorious finale being limited to 12 episodes. But instead of episodes about Anakin and Obi-Wan on Utapau having some deep talk about their feelings on the state of war, Cad Bane teaching Boba Fett about bounty hunting, or even how Sidious, Grievous, and Count Dooku team up to defeat Darth Maul and Mother Talzin, we got this. Trace Martel dumping spice for no reason at all, and them getting captured like 4 times by the Pike Syndicate. It is arguably one of the worst Clone Wars arcs, and definitely should not have been part of the final season. The Night Sisters from Dathomir were introduced in the Clone Wars TV series and have since been used in a lot of other mediums, like the Fallen Order games as well as the Ahsoka series. In their appearances, we see them use their Night Sister magic in several different methods. These feats include, but are not limited to, making Savage into a towering monster with seemingly no negatives at all, create weapons like Savage's axe or Talzin's sword seemingly out of thin air, use a crystal ball to know the exact location of any being in the galaxy, creating voodoo dolls out of people's hair which don't seem to have any sort of range limit, making people invisible, erase Maul's insanity, becoming an intangible mist thing that can't be pierced by weapons and move through walls, look into the future, raising zombies, and a whole lot of other things. If you couldn't tell by my tone, all these abilities are overpowered to no end, and create a whole lot of problems. It's unclear where their abilities stop, and in the Ahsoka show we expand on this even further. The 3 mothers there seem to be able to create an entire zombie army that isn't even brain dead like the ones in the Clone Wars, but can follow commands, walk in unison, and basically be like regular undead soldiers. Heck, friggin' Marok in the Ahsoka series seems like a regular dude in every way, despite apparently having been dead for decades at that point. How isn't that the most overpowered thing ever? And especially, why have none of these Night Sisters ever used this ability on a wider scale? Why wouldn't they just raise every dead person in the galaxy to come to aid them in whatever their reasoning for helping Thrawn is? Why wouldn't they just take over the galaxy themselves? Why didn't Mother Talzin voodoo doll Palpatine? Why could Talzin even be killed by Grievous's lightsabers, even though we see her being able to dissolve herself into thin air at a moment's notice? What I'm getting at is, there seems to be no limit to their power, and they're just kinda able to do whatever the plot requires them to do. And then, the writers expect you to just not think too hard what the further implications of said abilities could be. I like the concept of zombies in Star Wars, I really do. But the Night Sister at this point have overstayed their welcome for myself, with all their overpowered feats that seem to have no further consequences. It isn't explained at all if there are any limitations to their powers, what's required to use them, and thus they're rather poor characters in Star Wars. Nala Se is a Kaminoan scientist first introduced in the Clone Wars as the head geneticist of Kamino's cloning program. Her unparalleled expertise in bioengineering made her instrumental in the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic. However, her cold and calculating demeanor, coupled with her species-pragmatic detachment, quickly defined her character. For Nala Se, science and progress were the highest priority, with little regard for the ethical implications or the lives affected by her work. An analogy you could use to describe her is that she could have basically developed the atom bomb and then go on to not care at all how it would be used. Nala Se viewed the clones not as individuals, but as products, tools of war to be perfected and utilized. She demonstrates that to mere perfection in her interactions with Tuppen Fives, talking casually about terminating them like she was talking about her broken dishwasher, as she can't accept that one of her creations could be flawed in any way.
These Jedi are a curious cult.
Too spiritual for my taste. I will terminate the clone immediately.
She's also a big reason Five dies, as she drugged him to make him be perceived as a crazy person. So, yeah, that's why she's widely disliked by fans. Her portrayal in The Bad Batch only deepened this perception. While Nala Se showed a unique level of care for Omega, it became increasingly clear that her concern and actions weren't born out of empathy. Instead, Omega represented the pinnacle of Nala Se's scientific achievements, a perfect genetic creation that validated her life's work. She didn't want anyone to get in possession of her greatest scientific achievement in Omega, thus she does everything to keep her away from the Empire. I'd say she did redeem herself by blowing up the lab on Mount Tantus, giving her character a good conclusion, but she's well deserving on this list nonetheless. Ezra Bridger, yet another fine addition to the collection of sassy, bratty Star Wars Padawans. Ezra, or Space Aladdin as I like to call him, was introduced as the main character in Rebels. He's a young, Force-sensitive orphan boy who makes impulsive decisions, cares only for himself at first, and is very stubborn to his friends and master. Also, it feels like every episode he was in at the start kinda went like this. Ezra is loud and wants to do a good thing. The other Rebels characters tell him it's too dangerous. Ezra does it anyway, and all the others then try to save him while rampaging through the entire planet and killing every Imperial in their way. Finally, they end the episodes by telling him, "Yo, at least you learned a lesson," before he goes on and does the same again. It gets old quite fast. He does evolve a bit throughout the series, but a lot of plot points built up for him, like going to the dark side and such, kinda all just tempt him, but don't end up paying off in any way. But then again, he's actually quite crucial to the Rebel crew. We see him going from a character that was alone at first, now care about a family, and toward the final seasons he actually drops the annoying traits and becomes rather heroic. His sacrifice by taking Thrawn out was a satisfying conclusion overall. Ezra isn't everyone's cup of tea, and that's alright. However, time served him very well, and he does have a big portion of the fan base that really loves him, proven by the reaction he got from his live-action debut in the Ahsoka series. Sabine Wren is introduced first as part of the Ghost crew in Star Wars Rebels. She was their go-to explosives girl with a vibrant armor, a rebellious spirit, and rather impressive blaster skills. During her time on Rebels, she has a CV that would probably put most people in the galaxy in her shadow. At the age of just 21 years old, she had been a former Imperial developer, Mandalorian, bounty hunter, as well as rebel freedom fighter responsible for the liberation of the entire planet. Yes, she had a lot going on. These factors, combined with an alright personal story where she had personally developed a weapon that the Empire used against her people, which led her to want to fight the Empire, made her quite well liked, even making her a sort of a role model for a lot of young girls, which is very wholesome, if I may say. However, then the Ahsoka show dropped and the fandom started to split. In Ahsoka, Sabine's motivations became a lot more personal and questionable. The biggest sticking point? Her decision to hand over the map to Thrawn's location just to potentially find Ezra. Fans were not thrilled. It felt like a major regression, putting the galaxy at risk to possibly reconnect with a friend. No matter how loyal or heartfelt the reasoning was, you would especially expect someone like Sabine, who had firsthand fought against and seen all the horrors of the Empire at a personal level, would be the last person to be a culprit to help the Empire potentially return. So yeah, her motivation in the Ahsoka show didn't make a lot of sense. Her connection to Ezra was great, obviously, but Ezra being the only one who could help her feels less lonely is also just a slap in the face to all the other Rebels' character. So yeah, sorry Zeb and Hera, I guess you were just cool to have in the Ghost group, but actually all she ever cared about was Ezra. Also, her sudden Force sensitivity was also kind of out of left field. Her training under Ahsoka felt underdeveloped, and her actual progress in using the Force was extremely inconsistent. She literally goes from not being able to pull a glass toward leaping Ezra up the Star Destroyer with little effort. Mind you, without having anything really happen, that would have given her more training except for a pep talk from Ahsoka. Her being Force sensitive also messes with the world building on how the Force works, and that not just everyone can become a Jedi. We have a thing called midichlorian counts, which show how Force-sensitive someone is, which puts people into certain levels where no matter how much training you have, there are certain feats you just can't do. That's why Anakin and Sidious's power level is higher than someone like Obi-Wan or Ahsoka. With Sabine going from a Force novice to being able to make Force pushes as strong as shown, just messes with the power level shown in Star Wars, and I just don't like stuff that contradicts this. I always felt that Sabine's main thing was that she was very tech-savvy and skilled without relying on the Force, just like Boba Fett. Giving her the Force out of nowhere feels extremely forced and just doesn't feel right to me. The Grand Inquisitor is a character who made his first impression in Star Wars Rebels. There, he was the main antagonist of the first season, being a cold, calculated Jedi hunter. He was intimidating and a real threat to the Rebel crew every time he showed up. So naturally, when he was announced for the Kenobi series, expectations were high, but holy, this version of him is a literal caricature of him, both in design and his portrayal. In Rebels, the Grand Inquisitor is a Padawan with a tall, gaunt, sunken face. In the Kenobi series, though, they rather went with Humpty Dumpty with a bad paint job. Also, instead of the methodical and driven figure from Rebels whose only focus was hunting Jedi, the live-action Grand Inquisitor came off more like a bureaucratic middle manager whose focus is... I actually couldn't tell you. He's all over the place. I know for certain, though, that capturing Jedi certainly isn't his priority. He spends most of his screen time bickering with Reva and doesn't seem to be bothered at all about catching Jedi. Like in the scene on Tatooine, he literally stops Reva from killing the Jedi, and when the Jedi escapes, he just stands there and does nothing. It's your job to catch the Jedi, dude. Are you just gonna let him escape? Okay, sure, just casually watch him get away, I guess. The Grand Inquisitor in Rebels would have never let that happen. He would have personally made sure the Jedi was captured and put the mission before any bickering with his subordinates. In Kenobi, however, he just randomly starts monologuing and making random speeches that don't really serve anything, all while on a mission where the Jedi isn't subdued or even having revealed himself. Like, he even freaking leaves the planet without any reason, even though the Jedi he came for with the other two Inquisitors is still on the loose. He also seems to focus on the glory of getting to catch the Jedi himself instead of just focusing on getting the job done, because when Reva actually gets Obi-Wan out of hiding, he just randomly gets mad at her and tells her that he'll take it from here, even though she actually helped the cause by getting Kenobi to come. See how all of that's completely out of character? Also, let's not forget the fake-out death. Why was it written into the script? Why stab him if they were gonna bring him back? The reasoning given for the plot is laughable and could have easily been written differently. Also, some fans argue that the reason he's so different in the Kenobi series is because of his near-death experience after being stabbed by Reva, so I guess getting stabbed actually made him start to care about catching Jedi now. Yeah, doesn't really add up. To sum it up, the Kenobi show's version of the Grand Inquisitor is literally yet another character assassination compared to his animated counterpart. As we were already dealing with bad Inquisitors, here's the worst of the bunch. Reva was introduced in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series as another Imperial Inquisitor. Aside from not wearing a helmet and kinda just looking like a regular person, she's portrayed in a slightly exaggerated way to make up for it. One moment, she's calm, asking for information from commoners. Then the next moment, she blows up. I genuinely believe that people wouldn't have clowned on this scene this much if she just looked more menacing. They should have given her a helmet, a scarred face, yellow eyes, or something. It doesn't make her just look like a random lady that wears black armor. Like, no offense to Moses Ingram, the actress, but she naturally just looks very friendly and not menacing. But this is actually more of a nitpick and not the main issue with her. What's really annoying about her is that her backstory and decisions make no sense. Being a Padawan during Order 66, she watched her fellow Force-sensitive younglings get murdered by Anakin, and then proceeded to kill Force-sensitives as an Inquisitor in order to get revenge on Vader. Yeah, that friggin' showed Vader. He must have felt terrible when she went out of her way to kill more Jedi under his command. Doesn't make any sense, but let's ride with this for now. Her plan is to get close enough to Vader and then kill him somehow, and in order to do that, she hunts down Obi-Wan as that would get Vader's attention. Now, my problem is that if you look at her plan to get Obi-Wan to come out of hiding, it makes no sense. She kidnaps a young Princess Leia because she learns that Bail Organa, a prominent senator of the Empire, used to be friends with Obi-Wan. How she would connect the dots that Bail would then proceed to contact Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan would follow suit is really far-fetched. Like, wouldn't it be more logical for Bail to just contact the Alderaan security force, or even the Empire itself, as he's officially a part of it, to help with the kidnapping of his daughter? But anyway, she's in luck, as Bail Organa is apparently not the brightest bulb, and does contact Obi-Wan, so hooray for Reva, her dumb plan actually worked. Also, I really don't get what her plan was to kill Vader. Like, she even gets the Grand Inquisitor role. Was she going to snoop around him and wait for him to go to sleep and then murder him there? This is where some writing would be useful. I'm skipping over some other dumb things, but by the end of the show, she also has a very clumsy redemption, if you can call it that. First, though, she gets stabbed by Vader, and it gets revealed that this was the second time he stabbed her, and somehow she just walks it off by just being super angry. Man, Qui-Gon should really learn from her. Anyway, she flies to Tatooine to kill Luke to get her revenge on Vader that way. Now, once again, this plan of hers doesn't make any friggin' sense. Vader, at this point in the story, wasn't even aware of Luke's existence, so for her to go out of her way to kill this random kid across the galaxy who she assumes is Vader's child will do literally nothing. I like to imagine her presenting Vader with Luke's dead body and him just going like, "Why are you showing me this random kid?" And she goes like, "Gotcha, I killed your son," and Vader just looks at her all confused because he doesn't even know he has a son. But in the end, she doesn't end up pulling through because for some reason, after years of being an Inquisitor and murdering people, she just randomly decided that she can't kill Luke, and finally recognizes her faulty ways. Was there any build-up towards this? Nope, it's just plain bad writing. So yeah, give a last boo to Reva, and let's move on to another character. Okay, now let's spin the wheel of the worthless Inquisitors to determine which will be the next Inquisitor on my list. Yes, great. The 11th brother served as a member of the Galactic Empire's Inquisitorius, tasked with hunting Jedi in the aftermath of Order 66. At some point during 18 BBY, the first brother received a tip from a villager regarding the presence of Vader's former apprentice, Ahsoka Tano, in a small settlement. In a display of power, he slaughtered the entire village population. When Ahsoka returned to the village, the first brother identified her and boasted that her death would bring him great reward. He attacks Ahsoka, who, may I add, is armed with literally nothing, and then manages to get disarmed and killed all in one motion. Like, why do they have to be such a joke? I know they did it to show how strong Ahsoka is, but come on. Like, are you telling me these guys are supposed to hunt down remaining Jedis, even though every time we see them they can't even beat literal Padawans? This guy just symbolizes this once again. I know there's the canon explanation of Vader and Palpatine not wanting them to become too powerful, thus they only took in weak Inquisitors that were Padawans. But give me a break. A good villainous faction should actually make you fear for the heroes when you see them, not go like, yeah, whatever, they can't do anything really anyways. The Grand Inquisitor actually achieved this in my opinion, making one fear for the heroes whenever he showed up. But every other Inquisitor ever since has been a shadow of him. The fifth brother and the seventh sister being prime examples of that, being treated as the literal villains of the week to fight off for Kanan and Ezra. I swear that this is how the Lucasfilm writers go about introducing a new Inquisitor every time. First, they must wear super cool armor. Second, have a very menacing presence. Yeah, look at the 11th brother. Jeez, I get literal chills looking at him. He got that down great. Third, be absolutely useless, and then die after getting into a real fight for like 3 seconds. Way to write great villains, guys. Scorch, officially known as RC-1262, is one of the iconic members of Delta Squad, first introduced in the 2005 video game Star Wars Republic Commando. Known for his sarcastic sense of humor and expertise with explosives, Scorch quickly became a fan favorite. His banter often lightens the tense, gritty atmosphere of the game, adding a dose of personality to the otherwise stoic commandos. However, his canon depiction is a shadow of this personality I just described. In the Bad Batch, he's literally just standing there and taking commands. Standing there and taking commands, dropping one-liners like, "Yes, sir." And lastly, he gets shot by Hunter and falls off a bridge. That's our first canon appearance of Scorch. Yes, I know he was in the background in the Clone Wars, but that was literally a 5-second cameo. That's how they decided to depict him. Him being on this list is more of a complaint on Disney Lucasfilm than me disliking the character himself. Why did you have to assassinate his character like this? Why did this character of the Imperial Commando Commanders have to be Scorch? This is fan service at its worst. Fans see a recognizable face and armor and they expect people to go, "Oh, I know him." But instead of doing anything with it, they just waste it. He could have been literally any new character or clone commando. Like, here, I'll give you one writing staff. Swap out Scorch with my newly made up CC Commando Kennedy, and it wouldn't have made any difference to the story. Please, do not bring in fan favorite characters if there's no plan at all for them except to die in the most pathetic way imaginable. Oh, and apparently he isn't dead, as was pointed out, as he is in the background of the last scene, so yeah, we might get to see more of Robot Scorch. Also, to anyone saying that his behavior is owed to the inhibitor chips, I'll argue that we see most of the clones abandon their post and go AWOL. Yet, for a commando like Scorch, that doesn't apply? I don't really buy it. Lieutenant Nolan was a minor character introduced in The Bad Batch. He's an arrogant and cold-hearted Imperial officer and exemplifies the Empire's growing disregard for the clones who once fought its wars. Tasked with overseeing the remote Imperial outpost on a snowy planet, Nolan immediately clashes with Crosshair and the outpost's stationed clones, particularly Mayday. Nolan's disdain for clones and callous disregard for their lives makes him a despicable antagonist. Like literally Jeffrey Lannister level of despicable.
Help him.
Certainly not. That would be a waste of the Empire's resources.
And just like with Krell, I think everyone was rooting for Crosshair to shoot this guy. I'd like to imagine that every viewer watching this guy get shot was cheering afterwards. To sum it up though, his character and the way he was portrayed was very necessary to show Crosshair's growing disillusionment with the Empire, and thus he makes the list being disliked, but in a good way, as it progresses the story forward. Ewoks, these small, furry inhabitants of the forest moon of Endor, made their debut in Return of the Jedi, and are actually quite divisive ever since their inception. Some fans argued that their presence seemed to be purely for marketing purposes, in order to sell toys, while others quite liked that they contrasted the dark themes of the last movie. I think this split is actually best explained by Barney from How I Met Your Mother.
Because it reminded you of your teddies.
The bigger factor leading to them being disliked is because the Ewoks play a crucial role in the defeat of the Empire, by helping the rebels destroy the shield generator protecting the second Death Star. They do all this while being armed with literal sticks that you'd collect for firewood, slingshots, and logs. Apparently, these terrifying weapons from the Stone Age are enough to defeat the most technologically advanced army that's ever been seen in the galaxy. Some fans do argue, however, that it is a nice representation of how a real-life conflict in Vietnam played out, where the technologically superior US military was driven back by the Viet Cong due to them knowing the environment far better, and thus being able to launch surprise attacks at any time. In the 2017 DICE Battlefront, there's actually even an Ewok hunt mode, where you have to survive the night as a stormtrooper while being hunted by Ewoks. The twist? It's pitch black and you literally can't see anything that's going on. Another argument is, though, that the Ewoks are the reason that the Empire and stormtroopers henceforth have never ever been taken seriously again. They're just treated as literal butt monkeys and cannon fodders. A good villainous faction shouldn't be literally incompetent, in my humble opinion, but oh well. George Lucas started this and they stuck with it.